Good evening. This is Felicity. I'm talking to you from my library. This evening I thought I would present something slightly different from the other collections and pieces of collections that I've presented so far, and show some of my collection of children's books. I do, as I mentioned before, have some books that are not really for children but more for children, and I have one of them included in this, but the rest of them are all classics, books that, although they really are for children, are so wonderful and have so many levels and hidden depths that I think it's worthwhile, even though I'm an adult, it is worthwhile talking about them and admiring them and remembering them with great pleasure, because some of them I do, even despite the fact that they're very much for children, are ones that I read again and again, not all the time. The first one I think everybody is going to know. This is Mouse Soup by Arnold Lobel. Arnold Lobel produced many books that have subsequently been used. I think they're turned into or were written as readers, so books that could be read at a certain age or a certain level of comprehension of reading. But the stories themselves are wonderful, and they surpass regular, what I call miniatory children's books like Bernstein Bears that have a moral, that tell a story in order to say brush your teeth or eat your dinner or don't fight with your sister. The Mouse Soup is a representative book of Arnold Lobel's Frog and Toad. This is another wonderful set that he did of stories that, although they're extremely simple with extremely simple words, manage to tell more than just the story. I really like this one, and you're going to get a little piece of it from me. Anyway, this is Mouse. I keep doing this glare thing. Mouse Soup by Arnold Lobel, and it goes something like this, in case you haven't already read it. Yeah. So we're going to start off with. A mouse sat under a tree. He was reading a book. A weasel jumped out and caught the mouse. Let's go with my tail. The weasel took the mouse home. Said the weasel, I am going to make mouse soup. Oh, said the mouse, I am going to be mouse soup. So this here. Right there at the bottom, you can see the mouse. He's got a book in his hand. Oh, the tragedy, the pathos, the excitement, the adventure. The weasel, I may not show all the pictures because I've got a couple more here in my stack. The weasel put the mouse in a cooking pot. Wait, said the mouse, this soup will not taste good. It has no stories in it. Mouse soup must be mixed with stories to make it taste really good. But I have no stories, said the weasel. I do, said the mouse. I can tell them now. All right, said the weasel, but hurry, I'm very hungry. Here are 4 stories to put in the soup, said the mouse. And he proceeds to tell 4 stories, each one of which is a fine story in its own right, a lovely adventure, an anecdote, but in the end, he tells the weasel, now you need to go off and find these ingredients to put in the soup. And they are things like nests of bees. So I think the stories are bees in the mud, 2 large stones, the crickets, and the thorn bush. And in the end, of course, what happens? Yeah. Here it goes. The weasel is absolutely in bits. He has all the ingredients. And he says, now my mouse soup will taste really good, said the weasel. But when the weasel came back to his house, he found a surprise. The cooking pot was empty. The mouse hurried to his safe home. Yeah, I'm there. I'm so there. Can you see the library behind me? It's like Mouse, only bigger. The mouse hurried to his safe home. He lit the fire. He ate his supper. And he finished reading his book. Yes, mouse soup. I love it. All right, so the next one is by another very, it's another old timer, but another very favorite children's book author. And this is actually by a couple. Russell and Lillian Hoban wrote quite a few children's books, various different kinds of things. I think the Little Sister for Francis, Bread and Jam for Francis, so they did some series as well. But this one, I didn't even know about this one, and I think I thought, well, this looks interesting, This Sorely Trying Day. And it's another one with a funny little twist at the end. You say, oh, right. So the premise of this story is that there's father comes home from a father came home feeling weary, tired and weary. He had had a sorely trying day. When he opened the front door, he saw that the cat was on top of the grandfather clock and the dog was barking and trying to climb up after her. All of the children were striking one another and speaking unpleasantly in loud, harsh voices. Mother was saying, "Stop that," but the children would not stop. "My goodness," said father to mother, "is this the sort of welcome I get after a sorely trying day?" "This has been a trying day for me too," said mother. "All of the children and the dog and the cat have been bad. I scarcely know who to blame most." So we go on through various different episodes where each child blames the other child for the disaster that happened that caused the next child to have another catastrophe, and ended up having this big mess with the dog, the cat, the children, all fighting amongst themselves. Fighting amongst themselves. So it's not my fault. It's not my fault. I didn't do that. It's the cat's fault. It's Emily's fault. So nobody wishes to take the blame for it. So in the end, father says, well, we see how great harm can arise from a small act. Puss may have begun it and should be punished, but the children certainly behaved badly to one another and ought to be punished also. So should Bonzo for trying to climb up the grandfather clock after Puss. I agree with you, said mother. So then father gives them a penalty, which is they don't get to. Because of your regrettable behavior, Dora, Frank, Emily, and Wilhelmina, you are not to be allowed to press flowers in your scrapbooks for the rest of the week. And shall be sent to bed immediately after dinner. Oh, everybody's very sad. So the cat is very sulky and cross, and it's not my fault. I don't know why I'm being blamed for this. So he goes out into the corridor, and lo and behold, right beside one of the pieces of furniture is a little hole, and who should come out of it but a mouse? As she said this, she saw a mouse creeping from a small hole under the baseboard molding. Puss pounced upon him before he could escape. It was all your fault, Puss said to the mouse. Had it not been for you, I should not have been sitting in that chair. From that vantage point, I was watching the hole by which you usually enter the parlor. I became so absorbed that I did not notice Wilhelmina until she sat on top of me, which so startled me that I scratched her. And there he goes on and on. So then the cat gives his recitation of how the mouse was the small thing that caused all of these catastrophes to happen. The spilled ink, the scratched child, the crushed boat, and the inordinately laughing brothers and sisters. So the cat says, you have been the cause of this whole wretched business, and I am about to put an end to your evil doing. There is little use in denying it, said the mouse. It is indeed my fault, and I am ready to pay the price. He closed his eyes and waited for the cat to strike. What did you say? Said the cat. It is my fault, said the mouse. Where so much unhappiness has arisen, there must be a cause of it. Someone must take the blame. As you have pointed out, I caused you to sit in the chair and thus started this sorry chain of events. Let it be in my head. I am ready. He closed his eyes again. Who do you think you are? Inquired Puss, to put on such airs of nobility and unselfish heroism. You are nothing but a mouse, an insignificant rodent. You are the least of the least. I may be small and insignificant, said the mouse, but all this suffering must end somewhere. Let it end with me, since I am the least of the least. There's no need to be so puffed up about it, said Puss. The mouse said nothing, but waited. He opened one eye. You are insufferable, said Puss, and I refuse to let you die a hero's death. She turned on her heel and went back to the parlor. So then we go through a whole series where each of the members of the family, the cat, the dog, the children, all acknowledge their part in the catastrophes that happened in front of the father, and everybody makes up, and they are all happy again. Still punished, but happy again, because they've all acknowledged what their part in this family catastrophe was. And in the end, after all is well and everyone is happy, there's a happy family. Meanwhile, the mouse, shaken and exhausted from his encounter with the cat, slowly made his way home through the hole under the baseboard molding. When he opened his front door, he saw that all of his children were fighting with one another, while his wife was saying, "Stop that," but the children would not stop. "My goodness," said the mouse, "is this the sort of welcome I get after a sorely trying day?" I like this one. This one's tongue-in-cheek and really fun. Anyway, The Sorely Trying Day by Russell and Lillian Hoban. And this is one that I picked up. Of course I picked it up because it's by Neil Gaiman. Absolutely delightful. Love Neil Gaiman. He's the best. And this one, Odd and the Frost Giants, is one of those. He does a lot of children's books. This is a lot of children's books, but this is one which is addictive. It's a wonderful story. It's told. It's actually not in. It's not like basic reader language. It requires a little bit more reading skill, but the story itself is beautifully told, very spare, like a Norse myth, but not. The premise of this is there's a boy who loses his father to one of the raids, the Viking raids, and his mother remarries, and things are not so good. And he ends up running away, and he runs into Thor, Odin, and Loki, who have been magicked into animal forms by the frost giant who didn't get paid and has taken over Valhalla. So the story, of course, goes through that, and it goes through the adventures of the boy whose name is Odd, and Odd actually getting rid of the frost giant and restoring Odin, Thor, and Loki to their original shapes, and Valhalla back to what it was. And it's a kind of a funny look. It does show great heroism and the gods as greater than life people or creatures, and it shows them definitely with failings. It's beautiful. It starts. There was a boy called Odd, and there was nothing strange or unusual about that, not in that time or place. Odd meant the tip of a blade, and it was a lucky name. But it starts with that. There's also wonderful pictures throughout. I think I had showed one of them when I showed off this book on my Instagram page. But this is, I'm going to just show us, here's one of the pictures here. This is Odd after he's been magically grown and mended because he had an accident with an axe, and Freya wasn't able to completely cure him, but she did her best, and he has, in this picture, he's carrying Odin's staff, and it's actually a really wonderful story. I can't praise it enough. Neil Gaiman, Odd and the Frost Giants. Well, one frost giant. There you go. That's definitely one of my favorite kids' books. So another one which is even more timeless is by our friend James Thurber, and it is the 13 Clocks. He wrote a number of, there's three really fine ones. There's the White Deer, the Story of O, and the 13 Clocks. Three which I have on my shelf, and I think I have at least two of them in this really beautiful New York Review of Books children's series with very fun illustrations. And let's see, illustrated by Mark Simont. Introduction by Neil Gaiman. How about that? Neil has fine things to say about James Thurber's work. Actually, I think we probably mostly know this. So, an introduction quotes first a line from the story. Something very much like nothing anyone had ever seen before came trotting down the stairs and crossed the room. What is that? The Duke asked palely. I don't know what it is, said Hark, but it's the only one there ever was. And here is the intro by Neil. This book, the one you are holding, The 13 Clocks by James Thurber, is probably the best book in the world. No arguments for me. And if it's not the best work, then it's still very much like nothing anyone has ever seen before. And to the best of my knowledge, no one's ever really seen anything like it since. So he quotes a few things. He describes a little bit about Thurber's life in his own words. Neil Gaiman's words are very fine all by themselves. There's a little foreword by James Thurber. He talks about he talks about the process of writing it and some of the people that made it happen. And here we go. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of the 13 Clocks. It's really great illustrations. And it begins, once upon a time, in a gloomy castle on a lonely hill, where there were 13 clocks that wouldn't go, there lived a cold, aggressive duke and his niece, the Princess Saralinda. She was warm in every wind and weather, but he was always cold. His hands were as cold as his smile and almost as cold as his heart. He wore gloves when he was asleep, and he wore gloves when he was awake, which made it difficult for him to pick up pins or coins or the kernels of nuts or to tear the wings from nightingales. He was 6'4" and 46 and even colder than he thought he was. So, this is a story of how the Duke was worsted and how his niece Saralinda was rescued and how he got 13 clocks working again. Let's see this picture here. The hero of the story is a prince who's disguised himself as a beggar, and he's found out. Outside the tavern, the night was lighted by a rocking yellow moon that held a white star in its horn. In the gloomy castle on the hill, a lantern gleamed, and darkened came and went, as if the gaunt duke stalked from room to room, stabbing bats and spiders, killing mice. Dazzle the Duke with jewels, the minstrel said aloud. There's something in it somewhere, but what it is and where I cannot think. So the minstrel is the prince disguised as a wandering minstrel. He wondered if the Duke would order him to cause a fall of purple snow or make a table out of sawdust, or merely slit him from his guggle to his atch, and say to Saralinda, "There he lies, your latest fool, a nameless minstrel. I'll have my varlets feed him to the geese." The minstrel shuddered in the moonlight, wondering where his zatch and guggle were. He wondered how and why and when he would invade the castle. It's good. You know, it ends all right in the end. In fact, it ends more than all right in the end, because James Thurber is the master of letting the bad guys get theirs and the good guys get theirs too. And it does. It's a fantastic story, and yes, everything comes out all right in the end. 13 Clocks by James Thurber. This is one that you probably haven't seen unless you're as crazy about Umberto Eco as I am. I still have 2 more of his children's books to collect, but I found this one. It's probably on Biblio or something, and I said, well, I need it. So Carmi is the artist. Umberto Eco wrote the story. It is called the Gnomes of Gnu, but in fact it's much more fun to call it the Gnomes of Gnu. The picture pictures are kind of interesting. Very very sort of semi postmodern. This was printed in 1992. This is printed by Bompiani, and let's say the translation is by William Weaver. We know all about him. It's great. And this is the title page here. Title page. This volume has been published in collaboration with Stefano S.p.A. Treviso, Italy. So this is a story with a moral, but it is definitely written so that children could read. And it begins, once upon a time there was on earth, and perhaps there still is, a powerful emperor whose greatest desire was to discover a new land. What sort of emperor am I? He would shout. My ships never find a new continent rich in gold and silver with fertile pastures. This is this is pretty good. My favorite page is probably this one where the gnomes, which is on a planet that he discovers. I don't think this is not really going to work because these bigger books don't show up very well. The gnome says, "Excuse me, Mr. Discoverer," he said. "I don't think we need to look at anything more. No doubt your civilization has some very interesting features, but if you bring it here, we will lose our meadows, our trees, our rivers, and we'll be worse off. Would you mind not discovering us?" "But we have all sorts of beautiful things," S.E. said, irked. "For example, how many hospitals do you have?" "We have thousands, and they're magnificent." "What are hospitals for?" the chief gnome asked, after looking at some through the mega telescope. Some machines in this. "Obviously, you people are still at a primitive stage. Hospitals are for taking care of the sick." "And why do people get sick?" the chief gnome asked. S.E. finally lost his temper. "Oh, really? Do you see that man down there? He smoked too many cigarettes, so now we'll perform a wonderful operation and give him another pair of lungs, because the ones he has are all black. And that other man? He used to take things we call drugs, and in the hospital they're trying to cure him of all the infections he developed from using dirty syringes. And that man there? They're fitting him with a plastic leg because he was struck by a motorcycle. That one? He's having his stomach pumped because he ate some polluted food. That's what hospitals are for. You see what a great invention they are?" "They're quite an invention," the chief gnome said. "I can't argue with you there. But since we don't smoke cigarettes, and don't use that thing you called a syringe for drugs, and since don't ride motorcycles and we eat fresh food that we grow in our gardens and our orchards, very few people here get sick, and if they do, a nice walk in the hills is enough to make them well again. Listen, Mr. Discoverer, I've just had a great idea. Why don't my people go down to Earth and discover you?" So there you go. Umberto Eco. One of his children's books, the only one I have, The Gnomes of Gnu, or The Gnomes of Gnu. A couple more here. I think I'm probably getting close to running out of time. So this is a reprint of, yes, Mervyn Peake's Captain Slaughterboard Drops Anchor, and this is it's a fun story. It's got a little bit of surprising mayhem in it, because at one point Captain Slaughterboard somehow manages to lose all his crew. They all died in various peculiar ways because he runs a pretty mean ship, but he with his crew had discovered this island with all these wonderful creatures on it, including the little yellow guy at the top, who becomes his very best friend, and in the end they all go back to the island and live happily ever after. There is not too many words, and there are words. It tells a story, but oh my goodness, this is typical of the pictures. So Mervyn Peake was also a very accomplished artist, and these are his pictures and his illustrations. He wrote the story and he drew the pictures. So this is, there's actually there's a wonderful shot of him. There we go, they are. This is them. So they get back to the captain says, "I'm really bored with this whole ship thing, this being a pirate thing," and he goes back to the there we go. He goes back to the island with his friend, and there they are, beginning to live happily ever after, and they do live happily ever after. I love the illustrations. I think I found this one at the local library store where I purchased it for some ridiculously small amount of money. That's not the original. The original would be almost impossible to find, but this one, I will be happy with this as a substitute. This is another one. This is from oh, okay. That's the last one. I'm all done with this one now. So this is another. So this is one of my favorite children's books. Captain Slaughterboard Drops Anchor by Mervyn Peake. You'll notice actually I did pick a number which are by very well-known authors and happen to be authors that are favorites of mine for writing things that are very much not children's books, such as Mervyn Peake, who wrote Gormenghast, Umberto Eco, who wrote everything, James Thurber, who has a lot of sort of adult humor, and Neil Gaiman. The first two were, of course, straight out kids' books written by somebody that only does that. So the last one that I have is an illustrated version of H.G. Wells' The Magic Shop. Oh my goodness, this one is wonderful. The pictures are phenomenal. They are so creepy. They are great. This is the story of a dad who takes it's very straightforward. He's going for a walk with his son, and they walk past a shop that's selling magic things. And it's one of those shops which only certain people can go in and only certain people can see it. Well, this time his son was with him, and so they see this shop and they go in, and there's a lot of really interesting things that happen, including there is the dad. Sorry about the glare. These are shiny pages. There's the dad showing his son is pointing to very kindly pointing to all the things that he would like, but being very calm about it, not saying, "Oh, get me." So they when they go in the shop, there's a small boy who actually sees the shop and tells his dad, "I want to go in. I want." But the door for him is locked. Anyway, this is a great story. This one is one of the short stories that I think I have in another collection by H.G. Wells, and this one is in my collection because of the illustrations. There is so many more where these came from. You can see behind me, this is a new view of my library. I've decided that I'm going to change my angle a little bit to have some other shelves in my library here visible in my video. And I hope you enjoy this little dip into my children's books and my children's books. And I wish you a very good evening, and until next time, take care. Bye-bye.